Kavanaugh's accuser is credible. Will it matter? By Michelle Goldberg. Image of Brett Kavanaugh on the third day of his confirmation hearing. Credit Ron Schaff for the New York Times. Obviously, I believe Christine Blasey Ford, the psychology professor who says that Brett Kavanaugh sexually assaulted her in high school while his friend Mark Judge watched and, at moments, egged him on. I believe her when she says that Kavanaugh, who she says was drunk, held her down, covered her mouth when she tried to scream, and ground against her while attempting to pull her clothes off. I believe her when she says this incident haunted her all her life. There's really hard evidence in a case like this, but Blasey, the surname she prefers to use publicly, has done everything possible to substantiate her claim. Speaking to the Washington Post, she produced notes from a therapist she saw in 2012, whom she told about being attacked by students from an elitist boys' school who grew up to become high-ranking members of society in Washington. According to her husband, that year she identified Kavanaugh to him by name. When Kavanaugh appeared on a short list of potential Supreme Court picks, but before his nomination had been announced, Blasey contacted both the Post and her member of Congress, Anna G. Esu of California. By all indications, she wanted to head his nomination off without being forced into the spotlight. Blasey passed a polygraph administered by a former FBI agent. The utility of polygraphs is dubious, but her willingness to take one is evidence of her sincerity. According to Axios, some Republicans wanted to call on Blasey to testify publicly, assuming she'd decline. But on Monday morning, Blasey's lawyer, Deborah Katz, said that her client is willing to appear before Congress. Kavanaugh denies the allegation unequivocally. On Monday, he said he's willing to rebut it before the Senate Judiciary Committee. Judge, who wrote a memoir of his teenage alcoholism, has veered between denying the incident and saying he doesn't recall it, but it's a sign of how credible Blasey seems that, since this story broke, much of the public debate has been less about whether her accusations are true than whether they're relevant. Some conservatives, they're not just conservatives, insist that it is unfair to judge a middle-aged man for things he did as a kid. On Fox News, the former George W. Bush press secretary Ari Fleischer pondered the weight of high school misbehavior. Should that deny us chances later in life, he asked. Even for Supreme Court job, a presidency of the United States, or you name it, such arguments would be more convincing if people on the right weren't so selective in their indulgence. Donald Trump called for the death penalty for the Central Park Five, who were 14 to 16 years old when they were arrested. They've since been proven innocent. Children are regularly put on sex offender registries, sometimes for their entire lives, for conduct less serious than what Kavanaugh is accused of. In a sour irony, some legal experts think Kavanaugh's confirmation could imperil Miller v. Alabama, a 2012 decision banning life sentences without parole for most teenage convicts. Anyway, this is no longer just about what Kavanaugh might have done 36 years ago. We need to determine, as best we can, if he's lying now. The Judiciary Committee will be able to begin trying to do that at a public hearing next Monday, called by the committee's head, Charles Grassley, under pressure from some members of his own party. Senators should also demand that Kavanaugh's old friend Judge, who grew up to become a right-wing writer, testify, though Kavanaugh would surely prefer other character witnesses. Oh, for the days when President George W. Bush gave his wife, Laura, a loving but firm pat on the backside in public, Judge once wrote. The man knew who was boss. There is a small, dark part of me that thinks it would be fitting if Republicans shove Kavanaugh through despite the allegations against him. Anyone Trump nominates is going to threaten Roe v. Wade. Kavanaugh would at least make plain the power dynamics behind forced pregnancy. We would lose Roe because a president who boasted of sexual assault, elected against the wishes of the majority of female voters, was able to give a lifetime Supreme Court appointment to an ex-frat boy credibly accused of attempted rape. Kavanaugh, helped by an all-male Republican caucus on the Judiciary Committee, would join Clarence Thomas, whose confirmation hearing helped make the phrase sexual harassment a household term. They and 3 other men would likely vote against the court's 3 women. The brute imposition of patriarchy would be undeniable. If the Kavanaugh nomination is cudgeled, chances are Republicans will try to replace him with someone like Amy Coney Barrett, who is in some ways more conservative. She would put a softer, female face on the culture war. But that's a fight for another day. On Sunday, Politico quoted a lawyer close to the White House as saying that the administration had redoubled its support for Kavanaugh in light of Blasey's claims. If somebody can be brought down by accusations like this, then every man certainly should be worried. If the Kavanaugh nomination goes forward, it's because Trump and his allies believe that a certain class of men accused of sexual assault deserve impunity. The question now is whether any Republican senators believe otherwise. Michelle Goldberg has been an opinion columnist since 2017. She is the author of several books about politics, religion and women's rights, and was part of a team that won a Pulitzer Prize for Public Service in 2018 for reporting on workplace sexual harassment issues. At Michelle Einblin, a version of this article appears in print on page A23 of the New York edition with the headline, "Boys Will Be Supreme Court Justices." Order reprints today's paper. Subscribe.